The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as my phone buzzed against the concrete floor of my auto shop. I wiped my hands on an old rag and squinted at the screen. A text from Laurel. "Meet me after my graduation ceremony. I have something special for you." Something special? Right. In 15 years of marriage, Laurel's idea of special usually involved me writing a check or pretending to care about her academic friends and their endless theories about everything except how to change a tire. I glanced around my shop, my kingdom of motor oil and rust, where things made sense, where problems had solutions that didn't require a PhD to understand. The 1987 Mustang I'd been working on sat there like a patient old dog, waiting for me to fix what someone else had broken. Unlike my marriage, this one could actually be saved. The graduation ceremony was at 3. I had 2 hours to make myself presentable enough for the university crowd. The same people who smiled politely at faculty parties while their eyes screamed that I didn't belong. Laurel's new world, where she'd been climbing steadily away from me for the past 3 years. Dr. Laurel Manning. She'd been practicing the title in front of the mirror for weeks, rolling it around her tongue like expensive wine. I couldn't blame her for being proud. Hell, I was proud of her too. But pride and belonging are different animals entirely. I locked up the shop and headed home to our cramped apartment above the hardware store. The place we'd promised each other was temporary when we moved in 12 years ago. Funny how temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're not paying attention. The shower water ran lukewarm as usual. I scrubbed the grease from under my fingernails and tried to imagine what special thing Laurel had planned. Maybe dinner at that expensive place downtown, maybe a weekend trip to celebrate her achievement, maybe she'd finally found a way to bridge the gap between her shiny new world and mine. Yeah, right. And maybe pigs will learn to tune carburetors. I put on my only good suit, the one I'd worn to her thesis defense 6 months ago, where I'd sat in the back row understanding maybe every 10th word while she dazzled a room full of professors with her research on urban sociology. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd become an expert on social structures while systematically climbing out of ours. The university campus looked like something from a magazine, all red brick and ivy, perfectly manicured lawns where students who'd never worked a day in their lives lounged with books they probably wouldn't finish. I found the auditorium and squeezed into a seat near the back, scanning the crowd for Laurel's parents. They'd driven up from Boston, probably staying at the Marriott instead of our apartment. Can't have the neighbors seeing their daughter living above a hardware store. The ceremony dragged on with speeches about achievement and potential and changing the world. I watched Laurel walk across that stage in her cap and gown, diploma in hand, and felt something twist in my chest. She looked radiant. She looked like she belonged up there with all those other bright, shiny people who spoke in complete sentences and never had grease under their nails. When it ended, I waited outside like she'd asked. The crowd filtered out, families taking pictures, professors shaking hands and making plans for celebration dinners. I spotted Laurel's friend Derek, her mentor, she always called him, though I'd noticed the way he looked at her during department parties. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, the kind of man who belonged in Laurel's new world. There you are. Laurel appeared beside me, still glowing from her moment in the spotlight. She'd removed her cap, and her auburn hair caught the afternoon sun. For a second, she looked like the girl I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and didn't mind when I came home covered in motor oil. Congratulations, Dr. Manning. I tried to keep the pride out of my voice, but it leaked through anyway. She smiled, but something was off about it. Too bright, like she was performing for an audience I couldn't see. Thank you. That means everything coming from you. No, it doesn't. But I kept that thought to myself. So what's this special something? I asked. Her smile widened, and she reached into her purse. I've been waiting for the right moment to give this to you. I wanted it to be perfect. She handed me a thick manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. My name was written across the front in her careful handwriting. For a crazy second, I thought maybe it was some kind of certificate or award, something to include me in her achievement. I opened it. Divorce papers. The words swam on the page for a moment before they sank in. Petition for dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, division of assets, all very neat and legal and final. Surprise, Laurel said, and she was still smiling, that bright, artificial smile. I looked up at her, then at the papers, then back at her. Around us, families were still celebrating, still taking pictures, still talking about bright futures and new beginnings. The world kept spinning, while mine ground to a halt. You're serious. Completely. She pulled out a pen, a nice one, silver, probably a graduation gift from Derek. Just sign where it's marked. I've made it easy for you. Easy. Right. 15 years of marriage, and she'd made it easy. I stared at the papers. Part of me wanted to tear them up, to make a scene, to demand explanations and fight for something worth fighting for. But what was the point? She'd already made her choice. This wasn't a discussion. It was a notification. The shop? I asked. All yours. I never wanted any part of that anyway. Of course you didn't. It was mine, built with my hands and my sweat and my dreams. Dreams that apparently didn't include room for a wife with bigger ambitions. I signed where she'd marked. My signature looked shaky, like an old man's handwriting. When I finished, she took the papers back and slipped them into her purse with the satisfaction of someone checking an item off a to-do list. I hope you understand, she said. We've grown in different directions. We want different things now. We. As if this had been a mutual decision we'd reached together over coffee and reasonable conversation. I understand perfectly. And I did. I understood that I'd been weighed and measured and found wanting. I understood that my wife had traded up, just like she'd been planning to do all along. Good. She looked relieved, like she'd been expecting a fight. I'll be staying with Derek until I find my own place. You can keep the apartment. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Derek. Of course, the mentor. The man who belonged in her world of theories and conferences and wine tastings where people discuss the socioeconomic implications of everything except their own choices. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been planning this? How long have you been with him? Her cheeks flushed slightly, but her smile never wavered. That's not really relevant now, is it? What matters is that we're both free to pursue our happiness. Our happiness? She meant her happiness? Mine had never been part of the equation. I folded the copy of the papers she'd left me and tucked them into my jacket pocket. Around us, the celebration continued. Families making plans, professors discussing research projects, graduates talking about their bright futures. Nobody noticed the marriage that had just ended with a signature and a smile. Well, I said, congratulations on your graduation, Dr. Manning, and congratulations on your freedom. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in her moment of triumph. I didn't look back, didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing whatever expression might have crossed her face. I just walked across that perfect campus toward the parking lot where my battered pickup truck waited among the BMWs and Mercedes. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror. She was walking toward Derek, who waited by his silver Lexus with his arms open. She fell into his embrace, and even from a distance, I could see her laughing. Actually laughing, like she'd just pulled off the greatest joke in the world. Let's see who gets the last laugh, I thought, and surprised myself with how calm I felt. How clear everything suddenly seemed. She wanted her freedom. She'd get it, along with everything that came with it. The apartment felt different that night. Emptier, even though Laurel had only taken a few personal items. Her books were gone from the shelves, her coffee mug missing from the kitchen counter. Small absences that somehow made the whole place feel hollow. I sat on the couch with a beer and stared at the divorce papers spread across the coffee table. 15 years reduced to legal language and asset division. The shop was mine, the apartment was mine, the truck was mine. Everything that mattered to her, the savings account, half the furniture, her car, she'd already claimed. Fair and equitable distribution, the papers called it. Fair. Right. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter, Rachel. Mom told me, "Are you okay?" Rachel was 19, a sophomore at the State University 2 hours north. Smart like her mother, but with enough of my stubborn streak to keep her grounded. At least, I'd always thought so. I started to type a response, then deleted it. What was I supposed to say? That her mother had just blown up our family with the casual efficiency of someone canceling a subscription? That I'd signed away 15 years without even putting up a fight? Instead, I turned off my phone. The next morning, I didn't open the shop. For the first time in 8 years, the Manning Auto Repair sign stayed dark. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about Laurel's smile when she'd handed me those papers. The satisfaction in her voice when she'd said it was easy. Easy. She had no idea what easy looked like. By noon, my phone had 17 missed calls. Customers wondering where I was, friends asking if I was all right, Rachel trying to reach me. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to Frank's bar downtown. Frank Kowalski had been my best friend since high school. He'd bought the Anchor Tavern 5 years ago after his boxing career ended with a detached retina and too many hits to the head. The place was a dive, but it was our dive. the kind of joint where working men could drink beer and watch sports without pretending to be something they weren't. "You look like hell," Frank said when I walked in. He was wiping down glasses behind the bar, preparing for the lunch crowd. "Heard about Laurel. I'm sorry, man." Of course he'd heard. In a town this size, news traveled faster than gossip at a faculty party. "Don't be sorry," I said, settling onto a bar stool. "Congratulate me. I'm a free man." Frank raised an eyebrow but poured me a beer without comment. That's what I'd always liked about him. He knew when to talk and when to just listen. "So what's the plan?" he asked after I'd taken a long pull from the bottle. "Plan? Come on, Jake. I know you. You don't just roll over and take it. Not from anyone." I stared at my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. 41 years old, graying at the temples, hands permanently stained with motor oil, a working man who'd married above his station and was finally paying the price. "Maybe I should," I said. "Roll over and take it, I mean. Maybe that's what guys like me are supposed to do when their wives trade up." Frank snorted. "Guys like us? What's that supposed to mean?" "You know what it means. Blue collar, high school education, the kind of men women marry when they're young and stupid, then divorce when they get smart. That's bull and you know it." Frank leaned across the bar, his voice dropping low. "You built that shop from nothing. You put Laurel through graduate school. You've been a good husband and father for 15 years. If she can't see that, it's her loss." "Her loss." Right. That's why she was laughing in Derek's arms while I was drinking alone in a dive bar at noon on a Tuesday. "You know what the worst part is?" I said. I saw it coming. For months, maybe years. The way she looked at me like I was something she'd outgrown. The way she talked about her new friends, her new interests, her new life. I saw it all coming, and I just let it happen. "So what are you going to do about it now?" I finished my beer and stood up. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." Frank looked confused. "Nothing?" "That's right. I'm going to disappear. Close the shop, cancel my phone, vanish completely. Let her have her perfect new life without any reminders of her past mistakes." "Jake, thanks for the beer," I said, dropping a 10 on the bar. "I'll be in touch." I walked out before he could argue. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, the world too normal for what I was planning. But that was fine. Normal was exactly what I needed. Over the next 3 days, I systematically erased myself from Laurel's world. I closed the shop indefinitely, telling customers I was taking a vacation. I canceled my cell phone service and my internet. I withdrew most of my money from our joint account, my money earned with my hands and my sweat, and opened a new account across town under just my middle name. The hardest part was ignoring Rachel's calls to the landline. She was worried, confused, probably angry, but she was also her mother's daughter, raised in Laurel's world of academic achievement and social climbing. She'd understand eventually. They all would. By Thursday, I was a ghost. No phone, no business, no social media presence to track. I'd rented a small room above the hardware store 3 blocks from our apartment, close enough to watch, far enough to stay invisible. That's when the real fun began. I started with reconnaissance. Every morning, I'd walk past Derek's house, a sprawling colonial in the historic district, the kind of place that screamed old money and good breeding. Laurel's car was there most nights now, parked in the circular driveway like she belonged. I learned their routine. Derek left for the university at 8:30 sharp, driving his silver Lexus like he owned the roads. Laurel followed an hour later, probably after enjoying coffee in Derek's gourmet kitchen and reading the newspaper in his sunroom. Living the dream, I thought. The dream that didn't include me. On Friday, I was sitting in my truck across from the university parking lot when I saw them together. Derek had his arm around Laurel's waist as they walked toward the faculty building. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head tilted back in that way that used to be reserved for my jokes. They looked perfect together. 2 educated, sophisticated people who belonged in the same world, who understood each other's references and shared the same values and never had to explain why they found certain things important. Good for them, I thought, and I meant it. They deserved each other. That night, I called Frank from a payphone outside the hardware store. "Jake, where the hell have you been? Everyone's looking for you." "I'm fine," I said. "Just taking some time to think." Rachel's been by the bar 3 times. She's worried sick. Laurel's been calling around too. Laurel's been calling. Interesting. Maybe her perfect new life wasn't quite as satisfying as she'd expected. Tell Rachel I'm okay. Tell her I just need some space to figure things out. And Laurel, I smiled, though Frank couldn't see it. Tell Laurel exactly what she told me, that this isn't really relevant now, is it? What matters is that we're both free to pursue our happiness. Frank was quiet for a moment. Jake, what are you planning? Nothing illegal, I said, which was true. Nothing that will hurt anyone permanently. I'm just going to give my ex-wife exactly what she asked for. Which is? Freedom. Complete and total freedom from everything that used to tie her down. I hung up before he could ask more questions. Across the street, the lights were on in our old apartment. Someone had moved in already. A young couple, probably newlyweds who still believed in forever. Good luck, I thought. You're going to need it. By the second week of my disappearance, the search had begun in earnest. I watched from my rented room as a silver sedan cruised slowly past the apartment building, the driver peering at addresses. A private investigator, no doubt. Laurel wasn't the type to leave loose ends untied. She hired a PI to find her ex-husband. The irony was delicious. Here she was, finally free of me, and she was paying someone to track me down. Maybe her new life wasn't quite as perfect as she'd planned. I made it easy for the investigator. Too easy. I left a trail of breadcrumbs that led nowhere useful. A gas station receipt in the next county. A conversation with a motel clerk about heading west. A sighting at a truck stop near the interstate, courtesy of Frank's cousin, who owed me a favor. While the PI chased shadows across 3 states, I settled into my new routine. I'd become a student of my former life, observing from the outside like some kind of sociologist. Laurel would have appreciated the academic approach. Derek's house became my second home in a way. I knew which coffee shop he frequented, which route he took to work, which gym he used for his pathetic attempts at staying in shape. The man was soft, the kind of soft that came from a lifetime of thinking rather than doing, of talking rather than building. Perfect for Laurel, I thought. They can think and talk their way through life together. It was during one of my observation sessions that I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was sitting in my truck outside the university coffee shop when Derek and Laurel emerged, walking slowly toward the parking lot, their voices carried in the crisp autumn air. The grant committee meets next week, Derek was saying. I've already spoken to 3 of the 5 members. Your proposal is exactly what they're looking for. Are you sure? Laurel sounded nervous, which was unusual for her. The competition is fierce this year. Trust me, I have influence with these people. Your research on urban displacement patterns is groundbreaking. With my recommendation and the preliminary data we've adjusted, you're practically guaranteed approval. Adjusted. Interesting word choice. I still feel uncomfortable about the methodology changes, Laurel said. Derek stopped walking and turned to face her. Listen to me. This grant is worth $200,000 over 3 years. It's your ticket to the big leagues, conference presentations, published papers, maybe even a book deal. Do you want to spend the rest of your career at a second-tier university, or do you want to make a real impact? You're right, she said after a moment. I'm sorry, I'm just nervous. Don't be. I've been playing this game for 20 years. I know how to win. They kissed, a long, lingering kiss that would have bothered me once upon a time. Now it just provided useful information. Derek was helping Laurel cheat her way to a major research grant. The man who'd stolen my wife was also corrupting her professional integrity. How romantic. I followed them back to Derek's house and watched as they disappeared inside. Through the large front windows, I could see them in his study, papers spread across his mahogany desk. They worked for hours, occasionally pausing to share wine and intimate conversation. Building their future together, I thought, on a foundation of lies. That night, I walked past Derek's house around midnight. His study light was still on, but Laurel's car was gone. Probably went home to maintain appearances. Couldn't have the neighbors talking about the department head's live-in girlfriend so soon after her divorce. I circled around to the back of Derek's property. The man was careless with his security. No alarm system, windows left unlocked, back door secured with nothing more than a standard deadbolt. Academic types always assumed their intellect would protect them from the real world. Wrong assumption. I didn't break in. That would have been illegal, and I'd promised Frank nothing illegal. But I did notice that Derek's garbage cans were sitting by the curb, ready for morning pickup. Public property, fair game for anyone curious enough to look. Amazing what people throw away. Rough drafts of grant proposals with handwritten notes in the margins. Email printouts discussing data enhancement techniques. Bank statements showing unusual consulting fees from companies that didn't seem to exist. Derek wasn't just helping Laurel cheat. He was running a full-scale operation, selling his influence to multiple graduate students and junior faculty members. The man was corrupt from his expensive shoes to his silver hair, and now he's corrupting my ex-wife. I photographed everything with a disposable camera. Old school, untraceable. Then I carefully returned the papers to Derek's garbage and walked home through the quiet streets. The next morning, I was back at the coffee shop when Derek arrived for his usual routine. He looked tired, stressed. The weight of maintaining multiple deceptions was apparently taking its toll. He ordered his usual, large coffee, no cream, extra sugar, and settled at his regular table with a newspaper. I waited until he was absorbed in the financial section, then approached his table. "Excuse me," I said. "Aren't you Professor Derek Manning from the university?" He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "It's Dr. Thornton, actually. And yes, I teach at the university." "Dr. Thornton?" Right. I'd been so focused on hating him that I'd never bothered to learn his last name. "I thought so. My nephew is applying to your program next year. He's very interested in urban sociology." Derek's expression shifted to polite interest, the practiced smile of someone accustomed to networking. "Wonderful. It's a growing field with tremendous opportunities for research." "That's what I hear, especially with all the grant money available these days." Something flickered in Derek's eyes. "Grant funding is certainly important for serious research." "I imagine so. Must be quite competitive getting those grants." "Very competitive," he agreed. "Only the most innovative proposals receive funding." Innovative. Another interesting word choice. "Well," I said, "I'm sure the best researchers find ways to make their proposals stand out." Derek stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether my words carried hidden meaning. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Indeed they do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." "Of course. Nice meeting you, Dr. Thornton." I walked away, leaving him with his newspaper and his guilty conscience. In the reflection of the coffee shop window, I watched him pull out his phone and make a quick call, probably to Laurel, warning her about the strange encounter. Let them worry, I thought. Worry is just the beginning. That afternoon, I drove to the university library and spent 3 hours researching Derek's publication history. The man was prolific. Too prolific for someone carrying a full teaching load and administrative duties. His recent papers showed a suspicious pattern of collaboration with graduate students who'd received major grants shortly before publication. Dr. Derek Thornton, academic parasite. It had a nice ring to it. By evening, I had a complete picture of Derek's operation. He was selling access to grant committees, helping students falsify research data, and taking credit for work he hadn't done. The man wasn't just corrupt, he was stupid about it, leaving trails that any competent investigator could follow. And now, Laurel's part of it. My ex-wife, who'd always prided herself on her integrity, had become complicit in academic fraud. All for money and status and the chance to play in Derek's league. How the mighty have fallen. I walked home through the darkness, past Derek's house where warm light glowed in every window. They were probably inside right now, celebrating their upcoming success, toasting their cleverness with expensive wine. Enjoy it while it lasts, I thought, because tomorrow the real game begins. The grant committee meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. I knew because I'd been tracking Derek's calendar through the university website. Amazing how much information academics made public. I also knew that Laurel's presentation was first on the agenda, thanks to Derek's influence with the committee chair. Home field advantage, I thought. How sporting of them. Wednesday night, I made my move. Not breaking and entering. Nothing illegal. Just a concerned citizen making use of publicly available information and the university's own whistleblower policies. The anonymous tip I submitted to the university's Research Integrity Office was a masterpiece of careful documentation. Photocopies of Derek's discarded drafts showing data manipulation, screenshots of his collaboration patterns with grant recipients, a detailed timeline connecting his consulting fees to successful grant applications. I didn't mention Laurel by name, didn't need to. The committee would figure out the connections soon enough. The email went out at midnight from a public computer at the 24-hour internet cafe downtown. Untraceable, professional, devastating. I signed it a concerned faculty member and included enough specific details to make it impossible to ignore. Thursday morning, I positioned myself at the coffee shop across from the administration building. Derek arrived at his usual time, looking confident and relaxed. He had no idea that his world was about to collapse. Laurel showed up an hour later, carrying a leather portfolio that probably contained her fraudulent research proposal. She looked nervous, but determined, the expression of someone about to take a major step forward in her career. If only she knew. At 1:45, they walked into the administration building together. Derek's hand was on Laurel's back, guiding her like a proud mentor shepherding his protege toward success. The gesture would have made me angry once. Now it just looked pathetic. I waited. At 2:30, Derek burst out of the building alone. His face was flushed, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd been sweating. He pulled out his phone and made a frantic call, pacing back and forth on the front steps. 5 minutes later, Laurel emerged. Even from across the street, I could see that she was crying. Her portfolio hung loose in her hand, paper scattered by the wind. She looked lost, confused, like someone who just watched her future disappear. "Welcome to the real world, Dr. Manning." Derek rushed to her side, his arms wrapping around her shoulders. They stood there for a long moment, two people trying to figure out how their perfect plan had gone so wrong. Then Derek's phone rang again, and his expression went from concerned to terrified. That would be the dean's office, I thought. Right on schedule. I watched them separate, Derek hurrying back into the building, Laurel stumbling toward her car. She sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes before starting the engine, probably trying to compose herself enough to drive safely. Careful now, I thought. Wouldn't want to add a traffic accident to your troubles. That evening, the local news carried a brief story about an investigation into research improprieties at the university. No names were mentioned, but the reporter noted that a major grant application had been withdrawn pending review. The story lasted 30 seconds, buried between weather and sports. 30 seconds to destroy 15 years of reputation building. Efficient. I celebrated with dinner at Frank's bar. He was working the evening shift, serving beer and sympathy to the usual crowd of construction workers and mechanics. "You look pleased with yourself," he said when I sat down in my usual stool. "Just enjoying the beautiful autumn weather," I replied. Frank raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He'd learned not to ask too many questions about my recent activities. Instead, he poured me a beer and went back to wiping down glasses. The bar was quieter than usual for a Thursday night. A few regulars watching the game, a couple of off-duty cops sharing stories, an older man reading a newspaper in the corner booth, normal people living normal lives, unburdened by academic pretensions and social climbing. My people, I thought, the people Laurel was so eager to escape. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. The landline number I'd kept for emergencies, known only to Frank and Rachel. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Hello? Dad?" Rachel's voice tight with worry. "Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just taking some time to sort things out." "Mom's been calling me constantly. She says you've disappeared, that nobody knows where you are." Mom's been calling. Interesting. Apparently Laurel's perfect new life still had room for concern about her discarded husband. "I'm right here," I said. "Same town, same general area. I just needed some space after the divorce." "She's really worried about you." "I bet she is, especially after today's little surprise at the grant committee meeting. Tell your mother I'm doing great. Better than I have in years, actually." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Dad, what's going on? Mom seems really stressed lately. She won't tell me why, but something's wrong." Something's very wrong, I thought, and it's just getting started. "Your mother's fine," I said. "She's got her new life, her new man, her new opportunities. She doesn't need to worry about me anymore." "But she is worrying, and so am I." The concern in Rachel's voice almost broke through my resolve. Almost. But then I remembered Laurel's smile when she'd handed me those divorce papers, the satisfaction in her voice when she'd called it easy. "I appreciate that, sweetheart, but I'm handling things my own way now." "What does that mean?" "It means your mother wanted her freedom, and now she has it. Complete freedom from all the inconvenient parts of her old life. Dad, I have to go, Rachel. Take care of yourself, and don't worry about me. I know exactly what I'm doing." I hung up before she could argue. Outside, the autumn night was crisp and clear, full of possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new ways to show Laurel just how free she really was. Freedom, I thought as I walked home through the empty streets. Such a beautiful, terrible thing. Derek's house was dark when I passed it, but Laurel's car was in the driveway. Probably inside, consoling each other, trying to figure out how their perfect scheme had unraveled, planning their next move, their recovery strategy. Plan away, I thought. I'll be watching. The game was just beginning, and I was finally playing by rules that made sense. Rules where actions had consequences, where betrayal came with a price, where freedom meant exactly what it claimed to mean, nothing. The university moved faster than I'd expected. By Friday morning, Derek was on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The story made the front page of the local paper this time, Professor suspended in grant fraud probe, complete with Derek's faculty photo and a detailed account of the allegations. 15 minutes of fame, I thought as I read the article over coffee. Not quite what he had in mind. The reporter had done her homework. Derek's pattern of suspicious collaborations, his unusually high success rate with grant applications, his financial connections to shell consulting companies. It was all there in black and white. The university was promising a thorough investigation and full cooperation with any criminal charges that might result. Criminal charges. Now that was an interesting development. I was still reading when my phone rang. Frank calling from the bar. "You need to get down here," he said without preamble. "Now." "What's wrong?" "Just get down here. And Jake, you might want to use the back entrance." I walked the 6 blocks to Frank's bar, taking my time despite his urgency. The morning was beautiful, crisp air, clear sky, the kind of day that made you glad to be alive and free to enjoy it. The front of the Anchor Tavern was busier than usual for a Friday morning. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, pointing and talking in excited voices. I circled around to the alley and slipped in through the back door. Frank was behind the bar, cleaning glasses with more intensity than necessary. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "What's the crowd about?" I asked. "See for yourself?" He nodded toward the front windows. I walked over and peered through the glass. Across the street, Derek was loading suitcases into his Lexus. His movements were quick, frantic, like a man trying to escape before the walls closed in completely. A few neighbors had come out to watch the show. Nothing like a good scandal to brighten the morning routine. "Looks like the good professor is taking a vacation," Frank said. "Looks like it." I watched Derek struggle with a heavy trunk, his soft academic hands clearly unaccustomed to manual labor. "Funny timing, right after that newspaper story." "Funny," Frank agreed, almost like he knew it was coming. Derek slammed the trunk closed and looked around nervously. His gaze swept across the street, and for a moment I thought he might have spotted me in the window. But then he climbed into his car and drove away, leaving his perfect colonial house empty and his perfect new life in ruins. One down. "Jake," Frank said quietly, "we need to talk." I turned away from the window. Frank's expression was serious, the look he used to get before big boxing matches, when the stakes were high and the outcome uncertain. "What's on your mind?" "Laurel was here last night, after you left." That got my attention. "Here, at the bar?" "Came in around 10, looking like she'd been through hell. Asked if I'd seen you, if I knew where you were staying." "Interesting." Laurel hadn't set foot in Frank's bar since our wedding reception 15 years ago. She'd always considered it beneath her standards. Too rough, too working class, too much like the world she was trying to escape. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. But Jake, she was scared. Really scared. Not just upset about the divorce or worried about you disappearing. Scared like someone who thinks they're in real danger." I processed this information. Laurel, scared and desperate enough to venture into enemy territory looking for her discarded husband. The woman who'd handed me divorce papers with a smile was now frightened enough to seek me out. Guilt's a powerful thing, I thought, especially when it comes with consequences. Did she say why she was scared? Not directly, but she kept talking about how things were spiraling out of control, how she'd made mistakes she couldn't fix. She seemed to think you might be able to help somehow. Help? Right. The same woman who'd called our divorce easy now wanted my help cleaning up the mess she'd made with her new boyfriend. "What else?" Frank hesitated. "She asked me to give you a message if I saw you." "Which is?" "She wants to meet. Tonight, at the old place by the lake. Says she'll wait until midnight if she has to." The old place by the lake. Miller's Point, where we used to go when we were dating. Where I'd proposed to her on a warm summer night 20 years ago. Both of us young and stupid enough to believe in forever. Sentimental. Trust Laurel to choose a location loaded with emotional significance. She say what she wants to talk about? Just that she needs to explain things. That there's stuff you don't understand about what's been happening. Stuff I don't understand, like how she'd been planning to leave me for months while I worked extra hours to pay for her education. Like how she'd been cheating with Derek while pretending to care about our marriage. Like how she'd handed me divorce papers at her graduation ceremony like some kind of twisted gift. "I understand plenty," I said. Frank leaned across the bar. "Jake, I've known you for 25 years. I've seen you angry, hurt, disappointed, but I've never seen you like this. Cold, calculating. It's like you've turned into someone else entirely." Someone else. Maybe that was exactly what had happened. Maybe the old Jake, the one who believed in fairness and second chances and working things out, had signed those divorce papers along with his marriage certificate. People change, Frank. Circumstances change them. This isn't change. This is revenge. Revenge. Such an ugly word. I preferred to think of it as education, teaching people that actions have consequences, that freedom comes with a price, that you can't just discard people like broken appliances. "She made her choice," I said. Now she gets to live with it. And what about Rachel? What about your daughter? That stopped me cold. Rachel, caught in the middle of her parents' war. Rachel, who'd called me worried and confused, trying to understand why her family had exploded without warning. Rachel will be fine, I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. Frank shook his head. Will she? When all this comes out, and it will come out, Jake, what's she going to think of her father? What's she going to think when she realizes what you've done? What I've done. As if I were the one who'd started this war. As if I were the one who'd chosen betrayal over loyalty, ambition over family, freedom over responsibility. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped pretending that being a good man matters when you're dealing with people who don't care about goodness. So you became a bad man instead? Bad man. Another interesting phrase. Was I bad for exposing Derek's corruption? For revealing the truth about their fraudulent grant application? For refusing to disappear quietly while they built their new life on the ruins of mine? I became a free man, I said, just like Laurel wanted. Frank stared at me for a long moment, then went back to cleaning glasses. Miller's Point. Midnight. That's the message. I nodded and headed for the back door. Outside, the alley was quiet and empty, a sharp contrast to the crowd still gathered in front of Derek's abandoned house. News traveled fast in a small town, and scandal traveled even faster. Let them talk, I thought. Let them all talk. I had 6 hours until midnight. 6 hours to decide whether Laurel deserved the chance to explain herself, to beg for forgiveness, to try to undo the damage she'd caused. 6 hours to decide whether I was still capable of mercy. As I walked home through the quiet streets, I passed our old apartment building. The young couple who'd moved in after me were sitting on the front steps, sharing coffee and a newspaper. They looked happy, content, blissfully unaware of how quickly happiness could turn to ashes. Enjoy it while it lasts, I thought. Nothing good ever does. Miller's Point at midnight. 20 years after I'd proposed, 15 years after we'd married, 2 weeks after she'd handed me divorce papers with a smile. Full circle. The irony was perfect, almost as perfect as the choice I was about to make.